Hello everybody, I am Kyle Hannon, the cancer patient with the most gorgeous wife, here today along with John Cattermole, and I am also the cancer patient, I think no longer with the largest biceps anymore. I've been losing weight, rolling jiu-jitsu and stuff, so I'm going to say I'm the cancer patient with the strongest knockout punch. So today, we're here, as I said, we've got John Cattermole. I'm just amazed that I have this level of a guest on the show today, and he's a super humble guy, but I've known John for about a decade now. I think it's been a decade or so, right? 2010 or so. And he's been a mentor to me. He taught me so much that has helped save my life over the last decade in battling cancer. And we'll hear from John. How would you describe yourself?
Well, before I describe myself, which I'm glad to do, I will never forget Kyle and I were on a hike, a local hike here in Arizona, and we were hiking together, and he said, hey, you know, I just had a dental appointment, and the dentist was saying there was a lump on my upper shoulder. What do you think? And we kind of unpacked that journey together as he was discovering for the first time that he was in this cancering experience. And little did we know what kind of journey that would be for you. At the beginning of that cancer journey, he was told, oh, this is pretty simple. This will be a 95% chance. Wasn't that the statistic?
That's about right.
Yeah. A 95% chance of recovery. And here we are 10 years later. He's had more chemo than anybody else in the history of chemotherapy, and is active, busy, and although he has been diagnosed with stage 4 advanced stage cancer, Kyle's the kind of guy that takes a licking and keeps on ticking. So I'm glad to be with him today and enjoy our times of interaction about health and healing, and just catching up with family and stuff. So anyway, in terms of who I am, I'm a friend of Kyle's. and in terms of what we do is I have 2 Egoscue clinics here in Arizona, one in Scottsdale and one in Phoenix, and I'm sure that Kyle and I will talk and expand the idea of what the Egoscue Method is and how it works. But I'll just say right at the beginning that Egoscue is a method of posture alignment that helps to create improved function and reduce chronic pain so people can get out and live the kind of life they want to live.
Awesome. And you're also a pretty awesome grandpa. How many grandkids we got now?
Well, we have 6 children, and we are now, our daughter just received her foster child that she's going to be adopting, and that will make number 12. So
nice.
We have 12. I didn't tell you about that Jocelyn and Travis.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
that's exciting.
Yeah,
man, that's exciting for the family. So how did you get into this? And what for people out there? How would you? You're probably one of the best people in the world that could describe what the Egoscue Method is, and how did you get into this whole deal?
Well, Kyle, this was a long journey for us, and I was licensed in physical therapy in California for 25 years, and my wife had been, hitting some bouts of cancer. She had her cancer experiences, and as she went through those cancer experiences, they just extract more and more tissue from her body. Each time it was diagnosis coming back, she would have another surgery until she ended up having what they call a radical neck dissection, where they're taking lymph nodes and muscle tissue out of her neck. And she ended up in pain, the kind of pain where she'd get these nerve pains in her head and couldn't sleep at night, and it would go down her arm, and was a pretty miserable girl. And I used my physical therapy approach toward that pain and was able to give her temporary relief, but nothing lasting. And so through a series of circumstances, we had heard about the Egoscue Method, and I took her down to the San Diego clinic. We lived in Los Angeles at the time. And she went through one session there and found remarkable results. And it happened that the next day when she woke up, she just looked at me and said, "You have to find out more about that method. That was incredible. I feel so good. I haven't slept like this in the last couple of weeks. I just feel great." So that's how we kind of got started in the method. But the method itself was started by a man named Pete Egoscue, who in 1969 was a field lieutenant in Vietnam. And during a firefight, he took a bullet to his hip. And as a 23-year-old young man, found himself within 6 months walking on a cane, not because the bullet had hit a vital thing like a nerve or shattered a bone, but just his body's reaction to that whole trauma. And after that period of time, he was like, "Hey, doctors, I can't get back to being with my man. If I'm walking on a cane, you gotta help me out." So they recommended he go see a psychiatrist, and that the psychiatrist would teach him how to cope with the pain. Well, a young man, a Marine, wouldn't have any of that. So he said, if these Yahoo doctors can't figure it out, I'm going to have to figure it out myself. So he got a Grey's Anatomy and started reading it, and he read it through clear eyes because he was a political science major at Utah State before he went into the service, and he really had no medical training, not physical therapy, chiropractic, medical, nothing. So when he began to look at the body, it was just through those pure, clean eyes of a beginner, and it was remarkable for him. And so in a short order, he was able to get out of pain just by employing some basic things. And he thought, wow, I did this myself. And so it got to where he was helping other soldiers, and then he'd go on leave and help family, and got better and better. So eventually he retired as a major from the Marines, and then just decided he wanted to help people full time.
Man, that's beautiful. Why is it can you tell the people why is it called a method?
Yeah, so the bottom line is Pete was kind of unlocking what he could see in the body. And I'll give you an example. It's right at the beginning of the Grey's Anatomy. He read a comment, and the comment was that the body is a bipedal machine having all the same muscles and bones, tendons on the right that it does on the left. And so it was just a real simple line of thinking. He said, oh, so I just need the ones on the injured side to work just like the ones on the uninjured side, and I'll be off to the races. And so, as he moved his foot, which was pointed kind of out to the side, when he moved it forward, it was very painful. And he was like, man, I wonder why my muscles are holding this peculiar position. And so he developed a method of starting to think about how the body works and how bones are really told by muscles what to do. So bones don't, an elevated hip isn't caused from the bone, even though you put your fingers on the bone and it's up. It's actually bones, muscles tell bones what to do. So once he understood that, then he started, parsing out a way to think about pain experiences related to posture, and that's the method that we do, as a method of understanding the body, a method of interpreting the challenges with the body, and a method of prescribing exercises and positions that will help balance the body.
Awesome. And you were 25 years in physical therapy, and I know that wasn't an easy decision to leave physical therapy and go into Egoscue. What was a drive? You kind of mentioned about Billy. What was his wife? What was some factors, and what was some of your experiences in transitioning over? And to say too, I am a result of a reward of that decision, of you standing up, taking responsibility of your own health, which is a big mission of what the Egoscue Method is. And then I'm possibly sitting here right now because you made that decision, and I was able to connect with you. What was...
How did that work? Well, other than my wife and her pain experience, I would say that the last 3 years that I worked in physical therapy, and my physical therapy experience was generally a good one. I loved it. I went to seminars. I did all the learning you could do after school, and loved going through school, the whole 9 yards. But those last 3 years in the chronic pain clinic were probably my hardest years in physical therapy. And part of it is just because that was kind of the last stop on that the train tracks. There's this is where people would go when there was nobody knew what to do with the people in pain. So I watched people in horrible pain, just so discouraged they would overdose on their medication and purposefully and die. They just couldn't take it anymore. I watched people just become more and more helpless, and it was a hard experience to watch, because all we could offer was a little bit of minimizing the pain, mostly controlling some of the pain, but never getting them back to the healthy, active lifestyle that they had lived before. So in those experiences, I thought, it doesn't feel like I'm a part of the solution here. And probably one of the darkest stories is chatting with a doctor at the pain clinic. As I would come, I was like, hey, we gotta help these guys. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, we're not really going to be able to cure the pain that people have chronically. So we're gonna do the best we can, and we're just gonna make a lot of money. And for whatever reason, Kyle, that's not your value, and it's certainly not my value. Yeah. I'm not out just to, rake in a bunch of bucks while, doing a so-so job with those clients. So when I found Egoscue, and they had an entirely different perspective, and they said, there's no option. You must help people find their way back to their lifestyle. That is pivotal to health and healing. I was like, okay, I can get behind that. That makes sense to me. So that was the other part of it. One was watching my wife's result. The other was having that hard experience in the chronic pain clinic for those 3 years.
Wow, that's incredible. And I've learned a lot more about emotions and how they're linked to posture. And I know that you've really been able to study that quite a bit. Would you be able to talk a little bit about how emotions impact posture, or some examples?
Yeah, I think that's a well-asked question, because the reality is, as I went through physical therapy, we only talked about the emotional components of people in their pain experience in terms of we called them malingerers, or people who they had some secondary gain or benefit from staying sick. And it was all about emotions in their darkest and most negative side, and how it prevents people from getting better. So we had no, or I personally had no training in the program I went through where they talked about the value of emotions and attitude in actually making improvement. Now, kind of human beings instinctively know that, but it certainly wasn't a part of our program. Well, in the method that we're talking about, we look at three things. Is number one, a mental attitude or a mood, and your emotional mindset and your body. When those three things are going in the same direction, then you're going to heal. And when they aren't, then you're not going to heal. Like in your experience right now, your mental attitude about your cancer and the mood that you set kind of leads the way for your body, and frankly, under normal circumstances, how long ago was the first time you were told you were terminal?
Let's see, it's been probably almost 3 years now.
3 years.
Yeah.
So over 3 years, you've had this terminal diagnosis, and you're doing MMA workouts and jiu-jitsu workouts. So your mind and your attitude is leading your body, saying, you know what, I'm not done. I want to continue to live. And there's not been a collapsing in or succumbing to the darker emotions. You just say, that's not where I'm at. And part of it is, as we've talked about many times, is your faith and looking at life through that point of view, which can make a big difference. And another part of it is just, I'm determined to live the best life I can until the last day I can, that kind of perspective. So, and what you are doing in your cancer experience is certainly the way we think with the clients who come in who have either chronic pain or they have a physical limitation that's preventing them from doing something that they really want to do, like getting back on the pitcher's mound for a professional baseball player, whatever happens to be.
That's definitely true. I got choked up for a minute. That was some beautiful stuff. What would be your advice to somebody that is struggling with pain? Is it, as most of us have experienced, and I have many times before my cancer treatment, that's one way I got into meeting John. He was so gracious to me to bring me into the Egoscue Method and mentored me, and I learned a lot about it that I've been able to carry it forward and help a lot of cancer patients, medical staff, and myself. I'm constantly utilizing posture alignment and breathing and things that I learned from John throughout the day. There had been points where I probably spent just literally almost my entire day through the cancer battle implementing posture alignment into me healing and things like that. And now being able to kind of train in MMA and really link up a brotherhood with some fellow athletes that are headed to the UFC or in the UFC and watch their bodies kind of change and be impacted through the method. I'm very grateful for that. So knowing that we all experience some level of pain, or there's many people out there that are battling extreme pain, and especially those in the MMA field, you're going to get hurt. There's some point you're just going to get hurt, and you're going to have to deal with injuries. You're going to have to work through finding solutions, taking responsibility for your body, and being the person who figures out what the body needs. What would be some advice to what somebody should do who's struggling with pain, is just searching everywhere and they're not finding solutions? Maybe they've been told surgery is your only choice. You've beat your body up over time.
Right, yeah. Well, people, generally speaking, they go one of two ways. And I call it the desperate solution, which is basically, I'm so desperate right now, I'll do anything. And they run around and get on what I'll call the treatment merry-go-round, right? And so they start with their doctor and they take the meds and they're like, I don't want to be on these the rest of my life. And then they go to the chiropractor and they get some relief. And then they go to the acupuncturist and get some relief. And then they're, and they just keep going around and around trying to find someone who can get them over the hump. Now that's one client. And when they come in, they'll typically say something like, you're my last hope, or I've been to everybody, or I'm walking in here very suspicious because a lot of practitioners have promised that they're going to help me, and it's not helped up to this point. So we'll call that the desperate approach toward the problem. The second approach, and this is a very unique thing, I didn't see this in my physical therapy practice like I see it in Egoscue, and partially because Egoscue is more, what would you call it, do it yourself. It's people who really want to take initiative. But there's just a certain unique kind of person that comes in, and they possess a uniqueness to their mindset where they're basically like, I am committed to improving my situation, and I'm determined to do that. If I believe you can help me, then we're going to go. And if I don't believe it, then I'm out of here. And for those people, I'm convinced that they're going to improve. They will. And so it's almost like your situation. People probably don't know about you, and I hope I'm not giving too much information, but there were a number of times where you actually thought your life was over, and so did the doctors.
That's right.
And so when someone goes through that, how many times would that be? Do you remember?
It was pretty really close, at least 3 times, and there's at least 10 times where it was like, oh shoot, we're doing a test right now and I'm not expected to live, or something like that. So
right.
It's maybe 10 times or so.
Yeah, so dozen or so times that you've dealt with this thing. And so for most of us human beings, when we face something like that, that almost feels insurmountable, and we can kind of fade into this resignation place. All of us, you, me, everybody can slip into that. But we don't have to.
Right.
We don't have to. And I think probably one of the greatest lessons I ever learned about how to live life up to your last was a lady who I saw with brain cancer in physical therapy, or in Egoscue. She was great. They gave her 3 months to live, and I was with her up until the very end of her life, and she was not focused on the expiration date on her birth certificate. She was focused on living her life every day and maximizing it as best she could. She couldn't talk well, couldn't walk well, but she was determined to not resign, to live life, not in denial, but just to live life the best she could. She would be enraptured with the beauty of the sun being on her face or a bird flying by, and she could just absorb moments in a way that kind of taught me what being present was like. And I thought, wow, this is the way you can live life, whether you are facing a terminal diagnosis or not. And I brought that kind of perspective back and started talking to my clients about finding your way to being present, and used her as an example on how to do that. I think that's probably one of the most important things is for you as an example. For some reason, even if you had your darkest feelings and your temptations to resign, for some reason, when you're in those horrible chemo symptoms, when you'd come out of it, you wouldn't. You decided somehow, and I don't think that's unique. Like, ooh, it's the magic Kyle. All of us have that,
Yeah.
But you found it. And you were able to wrestle it, and you've let go of the thought that, hey, I'm going to live to 100. That's not your goal now. Your goal and focus is on, hey, I'm doing MMA stuff and I love it. And yeah, I got a terminal diagnosis and I tell the doctor I'm doing my MMA stuff. So I'm living my life.
There you go.
But that kind of thinking is available to all of us. And so people are like, oh, I got to live a longer life. Well, and now you're saying, I just want my health span, not my lifespan, my health span to be as long as it possibly can be. And I'm going to do it. And I'm doing everything I can. You're quite a hacker too, aren't you, on health and healing? So, that's good as well. Did I answer your question?
That's beautiful. Yeah. I was thinking too, when you're saying that, there's nothing that I did that was special or just, there's so many people that have done amazing things that just blows my mind. I just going in before I had cancer and before I met John, I'm just a below average guy, make a lot of mistakes, and so there's anybody can do it. You have that ability to do it. And sometimes it just takes simply reaching out to people. There's so many people out there that can give love, and you can give love back to them. And that whole setup there is one way that I use. I knew that maybe I'm not going to be that great at battling cancer, but I was able to have people and a lot of love from people like John and that helped me learn along the way, and to also just be able to overcome from the prayer and the love that was coming in. So it's possible for anybody, but you just can't do it. You can't do it by, we do need to take responsibility and be the initiator, but you also have to initiate getting other people involved in that too, I think. And wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, part of taking responsibility is a willingness to ask for help when you don't know where to go. Sometimes asking the right person for the right kind of help is great. And I remember in your early days, you did a lot. You were in a prayer room often having people pray over you and trying to get that kind of wisdom so you'd know how to take the next step and what to do. And I think, in that sense, you were garnering all of your resources together. And Tony Robbins loves to say there's no such thing as being out of resources. There's only an unresourceful mindset. And you chose to say, hey, I want to tap into the resources available to me as a church-going guy. I'm gonna pray. As a church-going guy, I'm gonna ask other people to pray for me, and I'm gonna use that as part of my resources to help in the healing journey. And it's contributed well for you. And you're more than willing, and you've developed a relationship with lots of terminal cancer people and help them to become resourceful in their thinking, right? And
it's true.
And to see a different way of approaching this whole cancer experience instead of the, washcloth on the head, woe is me, and I'm not. I put a washcloth on my head when I had surgery. Yeah, but I mean, there's something more, and when you can garner your resources and get into that more, then life can be really cool.
It's so true, and it's being willing to have a little bit of discomfort sometimes too, to know that you're going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but the other side of it is great. And I'm so grateful for the people that were in church that had encouraged me and prayed for me, and God works in every place. I've just been launched in this incredible community. There's the Egoscue community, and I'm still kind of sort of pay attention to it and link to it, and been able to connect with you and learn about it. And then I'm in this MMA community right now it's just been beautiful, the encouragement and the love in there, and to just be able to grow through that. So it's very encouraging. Please look into Egoscue and things. And we're talking about fighting, and I had just had a conversation recently with John about how Egoscue worked with Conor McGregor, and how that can help with the highest level, in my opinion, of function in elite sports, where sometimes you're facing life and death, kind of like a cancer battle or something. How did that come about, working with that level of athlete, and what was that?
Right. So, Brian Bradley, who's one of the men who've been very influential in my own life in thinking, and has been around for probably 30 years in the Egoscue Method. He and Tony Robbins are good friends, and Tony happened to be working with Conor McGregor, and saw, and because Brian has worked with Tony with his posture for probably over 20 years, and as Tony was coaching Conor, he realized he had a postural problem that if Brian could come in, that may help take him to the next level. So Conor, according to Brian, is a very humble guy, and is teachable and more than willing to hear what he needed. So Tony made that connection, and right before his last fight, they started working together, and was able to help him with some balance issues that needed to be refined in some good ways, and and we'd love to see the victory that he had after that.
Nice. And you were describing too how kind of the fighter he was kind of told that he might be kind of hunched over like this when he was fighting, and they got him to get into his mid back more. Was that it?
Yeah. So really the hunker down tightness, and by the way, I have the greatest respect for people in the MMA. I'm an outsider. I've never grappled like that. Intrigued to watch it, but never done it. But I will say that this is my limited opinion point of view, that MMA strikes me as and that's a pun intended, MMA strikes me as a way to play chess with your own body against another person playing chess. True. And there's something very unique and strategic about that whole thing. But the difference, of course, is that on a chessboard you have carved pieces that aren't resilient or organic or growing or changing, in contrast to your own body, which has remarkable resources. So, Egoscue is really about just basic physics. And, it's about levers and pulleys and, except related to your body. And so when you're in these advantaged positions and you're more solid on your feet, you can take a punch better. You can also deliver a punch better. And so many MMA guys, they'll hunker down and they tighten their mid-backs as a protective force instead of stabilizing with their hips and pelvis so that they can deliver a force. And so that's one of the things that we worked on, and a tendency that some of those MMA fighters have, it will serve their interests if they overcome that, become more stable through their hips and rely less on their upper body for their stability. What's the purpose of your of the podcast? What do you like to do?
I don't know if I've found a specific purpose yet. I really want to. I've been inspired a lot by podcast, I would say, probably going back 8 years now. I was just looking for things to put into my ears when you're battling chemos and you got to sit around quite a bit waiting for appointments, and you're sitting in the chemo chair and you're suffering a lot. Sometimes you're up late at night in the hospital. So I started to get into podcasts, and I was just searching around. So sometimes I'd have it in my ear, and I still do, of this, just no matter what I'm doing, even when I'm going to sleep, so that I'd be in the hospital and I'd have the noise canceling earbuds, and I'd have somebody's voice going in my head, and I'd sort of be half sleeping sometime and not sick and going through things. So I'd be impacted by guys like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, and those back then, Adam Carolla, Dave Asprey, all those guys over time, many podcasts I'd listened to. So I started to think, when I listened, I thought, wow, this is amazing. How do these guys get on there and talk like this? Was more of a writer. I wrote through most of my experience, but recently I've been healthier in the last year or so. So I've been making videos. I've just been enjoying making videos and things, and I just feel like podcasts now are becoming kind of like the next gen TV. Maybe like we had the Johnny Carson show or the David Letterman show. Now you look at something like Joe Rogan or the Timbo Sugar show, and it's kind of set up more like that, where we can really explore together, get into some deep conversation about some important topics that would optimize our lives. So that would be something in the podcast, and I don't know exactly a specific area other than that general sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's just
right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Does Joe Rogan even have a well-defined purpose for his?
That's
I
true.
mean, he's a remarkable guy and has, I think it's the most listened to podcast in the history of podcasting. Over time, he's been up there, and Tim Ferriss has certainly been in that number one spot many times as well. And it's kind of interesting, when I was younger and there was no such thing as the internet, people would be interviewed on TV, and the interviews tended to be much more formal. Whereas these, Joe will talk for 1 to 2 hours to somebody about what's really going on, and it's fun because his curiosity is just kind of a stunning virtue.
Yeah.
And so he's able to take people he doesn't even share the same view, and not criticize them as much as extract their views and understand them. Sometimes he tells people they're full of beans on his program, but most of the time he stays in his curiosity mode, and it's kind of fun to hear him, working through that process.
No, I totally agree. And we mentioned Tim Ferriss, and Tim Ferriss came into your clinic, right? And you were mentioning Tim Ferriss's first book, The 4-Hour Body. Is that right?
Yeah. He had already had one successful book up to then, and one of my clients was good friends with him, and called and said, "Hey, I've got this friend who's an author, and he's very curious about the method and would love to go through a treatment. Do you have any time?" And so we worked out a time for Tim to come in, and just like I was talking about with Joe, I think he single-handedly asked me in an hour more questions than any other client I've ever treated in the history of the Egoscue Method in Arizona. So quite an inquisitive guy with a whole array of questions, but you can see his mind works that way, and that's what makes Tim good at podcasting. So had a great experience and wrote about the experience in the 4-Hour Body, about coming to our clinic. It was a good time with Tim.
In that section of the book, it's a great book, 4-Hour Body. I highly recommend it. Is he went in and basically tested out. He had some, I think it was back pain, right? He was dealing with, and he went out and tested. Does this place work? I heard about this sort of thing. So he went into the Egoscue Method and was treated by John, and I recommend reading it. What he writes about those results is definitely awesome. So that was good stuff there. And let's see here. Man, you've really hit a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about here.
Well, let's talk about you for a minute. I'd love to ask you some interview questions.
Sure.
So the doc says you're in a terminal place, and yet you're doing some MMA grappling. You're doing jiu-jitsu. You've been heavy on the weights.
That's right.
What else are you doing, hacking stuff to keep your health optimal as you can and enjoy your life?
Definitely. I think to just keep punching. We do a lot of stuff. We're doing striking and just keeping that brain going. You mentioned chess, kind of like it's always making my brain have to work, and I just always want, you just want to keep fighting. You want to just keep punching no matter what, and kind of besides that, just hacking the body. One of the biggest things that I've utilized is the cold plunge. I've been doing cold plunges 6 or 7 times a day, and I've got there's a group of us that come here from the gym. A lot of people have come over here and cold plunge, and it's just a freezer, and fill the freezer with water, change the water about once a week. My wife reminds me to change it because it gets a little dirty with all these guys, especially after practice. So we'll put Epsom salt in there with Ignicia and different things in there that kind of helps clean the water too. But I'll wake up first thing in the morning and I'll hit a 30-second cold plunge, and that's one of the first things I do in the morning. And I go in there and I sink down, and the water will usually be in the 30s, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'll splash the water in my face. And I love coffee, but that's been better than a cup of coffee for me, and just getting myself kind of going and shifting gears. And I began doing the cold plunge 5 or 6 years ago in the complex that I lived in. There was a pool, so first thing I'd wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning in wintertime, and it'd be cold in Arizona. It gets cold at that time in the morning. The water was probably in the low 40s, and I knew if I could get my shorts on, I'd be able to make it to the pool. So I'd do that and walk down to the pool, and I'd jump in, and I kind of cheat and go into the hot tub. But I was kind of motivated to do that from Chael Sonnen, who has a podcast, and hearing about the Wim Hof technique and things like that. So that helped me with dealing with chemos and treatments and constant trips to the hospital, is that if I did that cold plunge, I knew that was kind of difficult, something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to wake up at 6, put my shorts on, walk into the cold air and dive into the cold water. But when I did that in the morning, I know that, hey, I did something that was uncomfortable, and it made my day start off so awesome. So I knew that if I did that chemo, a lot of people don't know, chemo is not just some poison chemical. It's a lot of chemo is derived from plants and things. So the chemo, it's helped me shift my mind. You know what? The chemo is something that I don't want to do, but it's going to help me. It's going to save my life. It's going to help me feel better. And so besides, I do the cold plunge throughout the day, and it's utilized a lot before training. It's one thing that's really helped me to be able to train at the level that I'm at. I was recently on the Timbo Sugar Show, Sugar Sean O'Malley and Tim Welch. That's a gym I train at. And they mentioned on the show that I was one of the most coming in guys to the gym, and I was doing that because I just wanted to really get in. I found something synonymous with fighting cancer at that gym. So I've been able to train at the level of a pro MMA fighter and all the avenues of it. So to be able to do that, the cold plunge has been huge. And then breathing with it, with a Wim Hof technique, XPT. I learned about breathing from the Egoscue Method, and how posture, I'll sit in static back. The linkage and the body hacking level of combining what John Cattermole knows through Egoscue and what Wim Hof knows is extremely interesting to me. I'd like to explore that level. Emotions, how posture is linked to emotions and things like that. So the breathing, I'll do that when I'm in the cold plunge, but throughout the day I use it to trigger my naps. I do at least one 10-minute static back nap each day. So I do the cold plunge, and then I get in I might eat a little something. I'm trying to make myself eat more because nausea has been very difficult for me. The cold plunge has helped me with nausea. It's helped me with some of the pain and cancer. And then I'll get into the breathing, and then I'll do that 10-minute nap, and that's been just a huge game changer for me. Whereas before, coming out of bone marrow transplants, I'd have to sleep sometimes 16-hour days, so I had to learn how to hack my body to get better quality sleep to help keep my immune system strong. And aside from that, I just try to keep moving. I try to work out or exercise or do posture alignment. That is, like I mentioned before, that's been probably the biggest thing that keeps my body in motion. Right now, as I'm sitting, I look like I'm just some guy, sitting on this couch and I sort of am, but at the same time, I'm constantly shifting. I'm thinking, my mind is just kind of subconsciously thinking about how's my hip feeling right now? Like where am I at? How's my breath going on? And John is very advancing, looking at that stuff on a micro level. So, and besides that, just continuing to be impacted by a lot of people doing podcasts out there, a lot of different books, and just trying to be around people that want to optimize health and grow together and continue to learn.
So going back to you getting up at 6 o'clock, dipping in those cold, doing those cold dips in the morning, are you like the rooster of the neighborhood? Everybody hears you scream in the morning, and they're like, oh, it's time to get up. Kyle's screaming in the morning.
They probably hear me out there.
Yeah.
I've thought about I have done that a few times. Like they hear somebody go in the water and go, right, what's going on over there?
Yeah, exactly. There's no roosters allowed in this neighborhood. What's going on? So, well, I mean, those are interesting, Kyle. How about, are you doing any supplement stacks these days? Are you taking in anything in particular? Are you focused on any foods, or how does that work for you?
There's some things that I do that it's very sad because of insurance, and I have to be careful. And what I do, I'm a terminal cancer patient, so insurance and the cost of care can be very high. I think somebody had figured out that, this is probably 5 years ago, that I had passed the $10 million mark in terms of care and what was being billed and things like that. And it's gotten even more since then because I've had 2 bone marrow transplants. So I have to be kind of careful what I say, but there's some things that I do that I unfortunately can't talk about, but people can probably kind of figure it out from other things that I might say on the podcast. But other than that, I try, some people do well with routine. For me, routine hasn't worked in terms of supplements, when I eat, the diets that I keep, and things like that. So I will try to find rhythms within rhythms. So I don't want to get too stable. I don't want to fall into the same sleeping patterns too much, because things happen surprising, kind of like it's the same kind of training as a fight. You don't know, all of a sudden you might make a mistake or not see a punch hit you, or something will happen in the fight. Maybe you'll get more tired, than you expected to. So things will pop up in cancer treatment the same way. So I've had to learn how to, I'll do the keto diet for a period of time. I might fast do intermittent fasting where I do that quite a bit actually, because it's hard for me to get up to eat in certain stages. So I might just eat once a day, or I might fast for a couple days. And so with supplementing, I'll try to kind of listen to my body and really pay attention to what I might need. Do I need a little bit more protein? Am I feeling like I'm not recovering as well? And then in terms of vitamin supplementation, it's really hard to measure that stuff, I've found, and how much is the placebo effect. So when somebody's taken something, they say it's helped me, I'm always positive about it. I'm like, hey, great, because I don't want to mess what it's doing in there. But honestly, I haven't seen a lot of real tangible results in terms of vitamin supplementation and things like that I could truly measure. I have definitely had when my calcium levels are low and I measure that, or things like that, or I feel in my body I need more vitamin C. I might up things like that. So I shouldn't say that I'm just completely not taking any supplements. I just kind of listen to my body and roll with the flow, and nothing that's a pattern that I really do. I might just go into taking a bunch of vitamins one week and not the next. And I don't know if this is all a good idea what I'm talking about right now, but I hope that answers what you were asking.
Yeah, in terms of an idea, I mean, you're not prescribing something. You're saying, hey, this is my experience and this is what I found. And most of your listeners are trying to optimize wellness to improve performance. And you're coming from that place of optimizing performance with the baseline of illness and figuring out a way to move forward. And so I like your concept, and let's call that resilience. You have this way of learning, wow, I need to make a pivot shift. This experience is what I'm expecting with this particular chemo I'm on right now. So I've got to make a pivot shift and find my way through that. And also, I did notice when you talked about chemo, and I think that's really important. It's the challenge in life is being able to create a mental framework that kind of empowers us and gets us making good decisions. And most people say chemo's poison, chemo's a necessary evil, but you reframed that and said chemo is going to save my life. I'm grateful for chemo, and in spite of the side effects or the difficulties, I'm going to continue doing this. And that reframing your experience, for all of us can be very powerful to make a simple choice like that. When I was talking about getting your body in that healing mode, getting your brain in that healing mode, the more we talk to ourselves, the better. In those with positive language like that, the better it is. Kind of like a guy who goes into a fight and says, "Oh crap, I think I'm going to lose this one." Well, he's not setting himself up mentally for a successful experience in that fight. And same thing with whatever we happen to be going through. And there could be those MMA guys out there who are listening to this podcast that are going through their version of illness, and maybe it's cancer, or maybe it's something else, and for them to stop and think, okay, so my life's not over, my MMA activity may not be over, but I want to start, looking at things the way you are, and many times it's the pivot shift, right? It's being able to say, okay, these are the cards I've been dealt, and I'm going to choose health and healing in this moment.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm really thinking a lot. I'm really curious about how emotions are linked to posture, and we hear a lot, truth over your emotions. Don't let your emotions take you away. But we have emotions. We deal with emotions all the time. Are you able to give some examples of some postures that you've seen that are linked to emotional states that a person might be struggling with?
Some of this is almost so obvious that it's become a part of our language. When we talk about a person being down in the dumps, or I have a Southern friend, he loves to say, "I was lower than a snake in a gully." These metaphors are used to describe becoming low, becoming small. And so oftentimes when that person who thinks real lowly of themselves, we automatically know they don't stand up in a powerful chest out way. They stand in a slumped position, embarrassed, withdrawn. Those kinds of feelings are coming. You can see that. If people are conflicted and they really don't know about their lives, many times their body twists. It's like they don't know which way is forward for them. And so their body will express that sense of emotional confusions by twisting around a little bit.
You might see a hip forward and something like
exactly.
this.
A shoulder twisted forward and a hip on the other side forward, or you look at their feet and they're both pointed not even in the direction the person's walking. And so those things, I think for me, this isn't psychological, it's the human being, right? We're not chopped up in pieces. We are who we are. And so our physical reality of getting out and punching can change our mental framework. We can come at our human experience through the physicality of it, right? And it'll affect our attitude and our thought life. But an attitude change can also affect our thought life and our physicality. They all just work together. So I'll give you an example. And I'm not really proud of this one necessarily, but I was treating this girl. She's a wonderful girl, and she had neck pain, and young, probably 30 or so. Was working with her father and started working with her, and she came in and she was on her 4th treatment, and at that point she was just complaining. It's not getting better. I don't know what to do. And she was just whining. And if you were there, I think most objective people would say, yeah, she's just stuck in this complaining mode. And so for whatever reason, I had lost my patience with listening to this anymore. And I asked her to stop talking. I said, stop. Why are you giving yourself a way out from getting better? Why are you choosing not to commit yourself to getting better? And it took her back. she stopped and looked at me, and I didn't know she was going to walk out the door and say, "Give me my money back. I'm never coming back here." I had no idea what was going to happen, but I do know that this place she was at mentally was affecting her physical situation. So anyway, we scheduled her weekly, and she came back in the next week, and I said, "How you doing?" She said, "Great, the pain's gone." I said, "Really?" She said, "When you were talking, I had no idea I had an impactor could control this pain. I thought it was happening to me. I didn't know I could do something about it." And that little mental shift changed her whole experience. Now, she had had pain for a long time before she had seen me, but she needed to see her capabilities. And at that moment, we found the language to help her realize her capabilities, and that created the shift. And she finished her program, and every time she came in, she had lots of stuff to offer, contributions for what we needed to do to take her healing journey to the next step, and it was a very good experience.
That's awesome. Wow. That's incredible. I was just thinking about when you said that experiences. I think that's an experience to be proud of, and I'm grateful you shared it. I believe I was in the clinic, and you were in your office working with, and I hope it's okay to talk about this, with another client who was a gay man, nice guy, and he was in the office with you, and you were helping him with posture stuff, and he kind of made a pass at you, and you said very nicely, like, "Oh no, I'm not interested, thank you," or something like that, and continued on with the session. I asked you about it afterwards, or you told me about it, and you said when that happened, you were not offended or anything like that. All that went through your mind is, how can I help this man? What can I do to help him? He's suffering so much right now, and that impacted me so much. It just hit me so, like it was almost like a calling. Like it carried forward into the cancer battle. I hear cancer patients that constantly, "Oh, you made it through this. You know what? I feel hopeless. I'm stuck on my couch. What can you provide for me? What can you do? I need help." Or just being able to tell people, "Hey, I made it through it. You can do it." You know, that encouragement. What can I do to help this person who just can't get off the couch? They're just stuck on the couch. And both John and I are Bible guys, and I've learned a lot from the Bible from John as well. I believe that you studied right in the ministry and had done some pastoral work, and we both really, I know John is a very open guy. We're always open to hearing about anybody else's belief, and I believe the Bible says that, hey, we need to all freely make our own choice. We need to take responsibility of our minds and our body and our spiritual life. How is your relationship with the Lord and His Word in the Bible? How has that impacted your whole walk? I mean, that's kind of a big general question, but would you be able to talk about how that goes into the Egoscue Method and things like that?
Well, I think every human being gets to make assumptions about their identity. Who am I? You know, and some people will say things like, at the center of my being, I am an MMA fighter. Or at the center of my being, I am a physical therapist. Or at the center of my being, I am a wife. And they'll decide who they really essentially are. And I think being a Bible guy, as you describe it, has given me some clarity on who I am as a person who can relate to my Creator, who I am as a person who is in this human race with all sorts of people that are asking all the same basic questions I'm asking. And I think in that sense, it's guided me because, number one, who I am in relation to my Creator kind of gives me the stability to appreciate the moments in life that are the most difficult for me, whatever they happen to be, and know that I'm equipped and capable. And sometimes the reality is life sucks, but because I'm related to my Creator, I have the resources now to do good in that moment. But I think the other part too is, many times, as you know, in the Bible, when it says Jesus looked out with people with much different beliefs than he had, it says, and he looked on the multitude with compassion. And I think about that often, kind of like the Mr. Rogers quote. I don't know if you've heard that one, but Mr. Rogers' mother would always say, son, whatever tragedy you see, always look for the people who are helping and who are serving in those tragedies. And I think, Mr. Rogers was a very devout Christian man. I think that's a good way to think about the experience of life is, whom can I have compassion on, or who people are in it, and life isn't about judgment. It's not about, and we live in such polarized times right now, it's about contribution. And I thought, if violent protesters came to my neighborhood, what would I do? And I thought, I'd get a bunch of water and see if I could offer them some water, because I don't want them to faint. I don't want them to be miserable. Find something to offer others as they're in their journey. So does that...
That's beautiful. Man.
Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. So you're trying to sort it out from that point of view. But really, we're not separate. As Bible guys like you described, we don't feel like we're separate from other people.
Yeah.
We're all a part of the same human race, trying to figure it out and contribute in the best way we can.
That is so good. Wow. You're such a tremendous father, grandfather, husband, and I had the benefit of being able to spend a lot of time with you, and you'd visit me in the hospital too, and you always provided a lot of wisdom in those areas in terms of family. What caused you to kind of get so interested into it? You just seem to be very passionate about continuing to learn about how to be a great father, and how to be a better husband, and how to be in all that area.
Yeah. Well, many times those passions we have are born out of our own moments of darkness. And my real father was an alcoholic and was completely separated from our family. And my stepdad, I found out later in life, he ran a prostitution ring. And by today's standards, he definitely would have been in prison for the way he physically abused us. So it was just unpleasant, unique physical abuse, and I don't want to compare my mind to anybody else. That was the situation I found myself in. And sometimes just innately you say, this is not the way I'm going to live. And by the way, so my children, when we get together for family night, my children, my wife, they'll drink wine, and they always ask me, will you drink? And I never really analyzed why, but I never drink. I don't drink alcohol at all. But one time, my wife says, do you think that's because of your father? And I said, probably so. Wow. Probably so. Wow. And so, sometimes you make these decisions unconsciously, but I think having two fathers like that, one who was disengaged with our family, and then one who was, just this driven type A, keep your thumb on the family and just have this vile part of his thing, running prostitution rings while he was married, all that stuff. I thought, nope, not for me. And so then once I understood, Jesus' claims and Jesus' callings, I thought, oh, okay, this is what he says life ought to be like. And so that inspired me. And so that's kind of how it worked for me.
Wow.
So by the way, we're on our, this year is our 40th wedding anniversary, so I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And as a very successful businessman over the years, and being able to provide a service to help other people and profiting from that, what advice do you give to somebody who wants to follow those same footsteps? There's so many people out there. We hear about the economy and all this crisis, but sometimes that can be the best time to start up a business or go after a passion. What advice would you give to somebody?
I think there's just always opportunities, and most often what comes to people's minds is the limitations. Oh my gosh, we're in a bad economy, it must not be a good time, or this particular area, there's a glut of people working in this, it won't work anymore. But I think when people, when they can find their way to a passion, when they can find their way to being of service to other people, or when they find their center place in their own lives, things just flow. You know, Bill Gates wasn't out to become the richest man in the world. I don't know if you've ever read Gates' notes, but he's kind of an intriguing guy, and he can't help himself. He runs, you know, he's in this foundation with his wife, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they're just constantly, how can we make life better for others is the question they're asking. And they have, if you go to gatesnotes.com, you can see all the different ways that they're working on answering that question. By the way, he doesn't get money, he spends money for that. So, but now he's got the resources that he can do that. And really his approach hasn't changed from the time that he ran Microsoft until now. It's the same approach. One was a money generating approach, and one was is a money contribution approach. And did I tell you about my friend who knew Mother Teresa?
Remind me again.
Yeah. He was told me some interesting things about her, and sometimes she gets bad press, but that certainly wasn't his perspective, that she was like that at all. And you know, in terms of her money raising organization, over her life she raised lots of money, but it doesn't matter. She wasn't known as the fundraising specialist or put on podcasts for the fundraising specialist, because that wasn't her passion. Her passion was helping people who were in need, in particular in India, dying people, giving them their last bath before they died or whatever. And she was often approached by the Hindu majority and told to shut down because she was taking care of these Hindu people, and they thought, do you think you're better than us that you're taking care of us? But oftentimes when these people would come to her organization and saw the service she was doing, they were like, leave her alone, she's doing something good. And all that money that she made or volunteered, she lived a simple lifestyle, and she focused on her passion. What a remarkable thing to do. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Man.
And Tim Ferris, the friend who introduced him to me, he made an interesting comment one time. He said, money is the byproduct of value creation. And when you find yourself creating value for other people, it's easy for money to flow. If you chase money, it's kind of an empty and elusive dream. If you chase helping others and really being of service to other people, and that's sincerely what you want, money will flow. It just happens.
Man, that's beautiful. That's good. I'm sitting here, and somebody had mentioned they saw me doing this a lot with my fingers, like fidgeting around. I'm always doing some kind of posture stuff that I probably learned from John originally. But something that came to mind there is, and I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit, is the importance of just not staying idle. Rest is so important. When we feel tired and we feel exhausted from things, the natural tendency is our body needs rest, but we're not going to get good quality rest if we haven't been moving in a healthy way. And one reason I do this with my fingers is because I with all those chemos setting that record or whatever, I got extreme neuropathy to the point where most people, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, would end up in the treatment that I was in at the time, would end up in a wheelchair, not able to walk for the rest of their life, and had been told that they were neurologically affected from it, and it was getting pretty intense. So I started to think about those principles from what I learned from John and about some other areas of not to stay stagnant, but to keep moving, Pete Egoscue has written some great books I recommend reading, is the importance of how easy it is to sit. I mean, the importance of moving counter to how easy it is to sit. We're just a culture of sitting now. We're sitting in our cars, we're sitting in the couches, we're sitting at work, and we're just always sitting. We're watching TV. We're exhausted from sitting so much and having our brain work so much. But I learned the importance of constantly doing this to my fingers, because I realized that the more I wasn't doing this, even when it hurt and I couldn't even feel them, and if you've had bad neuropathy, you know the feeling. It's kind of a combination of feeling pain there and you can't feel them. But I kept doing this, and I learned that that would restore the function better. I'm moving my fingers, my feet. I walk on golf grass or something, or walk on sand, and just kept walking barefoot as much as I can, which is also another big value we share in optimizing health. And I know that the Egoscue Method has really started to focus more on the feet, and we've been working with some of the MMA athletes. Art is kind of a secretly a professional underground pedicure. She's really into health of feet, and she's been working with a lot of the athletes there. What is the importance that you guys are focusing on right now in the feet, and would you be able to share some of the new breakthroughs that you've learned in that area?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But, getting to your point, I think we can create these disempowering either-or scenarios in our life. Either I'm going to perform and run marathons, or my life sucks and it's over. These kinds of distinctions that people go through that discourage them. And when you're talking about being in chemo, and you certainly can't get up and take walks, and you've got an IV in, and you feel nauseated, and you find your way to some sort of movement to remind you that you're in your body, and that the body is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Your body's not your enemy or anything else, even though you're in this cancer situation you're in. So simple movements, we call it together, you and I, taking what the body will give you. And so when your body may not respond according to your expectations, it doesn't mean you can't move or take what your body will give you. And finding your way to those kinds of movements and activities can be a great start to being able to enhance your capacity for more and for more. And if you're at a place where you're let's say stuck and you're not enhancing your capacity yet, you still have resources. Function within those resources, whatever they happen to be. So I think that's one thing I really wanted to point out, because when people come in, sometimes they want to win, in the cage. But other people, when they come to see us, they just want to be able to hold their husband's hand and go for a romantic walk on the beach and not be in misery. And that's okay. It's the goal is kind of defined by the client, but activities vary, and we have different interests in activities, and we also have different capacities. So just be in your capacity and enjoy your life. I thought the lady I told you about that had brain cancer, one of the moments that was the best moment with her is she and I were sitting talking, and she wouldn't be able to recruit all the words that she could to have a normal sentence. So sometimes I'd have to work with her a little bit.
Chemo-brained.
Yeah, exactly. And she was working through this time. Her family took her to church, and she hadn't been to church for a while. And she was telling me, I scared my family, and it took me a while to figure out what it was. And in the middle of the service, she was on a walker. In the middle of the service, she just stood up with no assistive devices. And everybody around her was like, Mom, sit down, don't hurt yourself. And I'm like, why did you stand up? And she couldn't find the word, and she was looking at me and trying to figure it out. And all of a sudden, it struck me, it was reverence, wasn't it? Wow. And she says, reverence.
Wow.
And she had a moment that was symbolically uplifting, and it just didn't feel right to sit in their chair. And so she stood. Now, this woman had a hard time standing. This wasn't an easy thing for her.
That's amazing.
But so I said, what was the experience of the reverence? And she was telling me they were singing a song, and it happened that I knew that song.
Wow.
So I said, I'm not a good singer, but if I sing that song, will you stand for me? And she's very clear, yes. So I started singing the song as best I could, and she had to mumble out the words with me. She couldn't say them well, but boom, she just started raising as I did it. And that was taking what her body would give her.
Wow.
And she found that the foundation of all that was the reverence, and nobody had ever tapped into her physicality through reverence. She found it herself.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that a good story?
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so back to your question about feet. And as you were describing with sitting, like when you and I were kids, you'd run around all summer barefoot and climbing trees and goofing around. And the time you come in the house is when mom would scream, supper, or ding her bell or whatever she happened to do. And then it was time to go in the house, and then you'd have supper and watch Flipper and have to take a bath. But that's the way life was lived. And now, I mean, the opportunity to be using technology and to be sitting is so much more. So, if you take all the skin and muscle and all that stuff away and just look at a skeleton, and if it was a person from another planet that came to another galaxy that came, and they looked at it, they'd be, oh, this was designed to move. Look at how these bones just move apart from each other. Yeah, movement. That's what this was. This was a design for movement. And when we kind of limit ourselves from movement, then the body isn't triggered to thrive, And so that's sitting. When we sit, we're not bearing weight on our feet anymore. And when we're not bearing weight on our feet anymore, they don't, the body tends toward efficiency, right? So what you don't use, the body doesn't direct resources to that area anymore because it's not being used. So that's the problem now, is that our feet, we're just not on our feet like we used to be. The body doesn't feel a need to, or the brain doesn't feel a need to contribute to that. So now we realize, wow, this has become such a serious problem that we've got to get people accepting loads on their feet and enjoying it. And back in the old days, little kids, 10 hours on their feet or jumping on their bicycles or running around, that was just the normal stuff. And now as parents, we feel pretty proud if we say to our child, okay, only 1 more hour on the computer, and then you have to go outside, and they're outside for a half an hour. We feel like, victory.
True.
So yeah, I mean, that's a part of the thing, is just helping our children and ourselves to derive pleasure from being physical beings, So you're getting out and standing or rolling around at the gym, and I can imagine people saying to you, at least some people saying, you know what, you're terminal. Why are you wasting your time doing that? You spend time with your loved ones. Don't worry about it. But for you, you're like, God bless me with this body. I am using this body. This body may have cancer in it, but I don't care. I mean, that's you can shift your mentality. But sitting's not evil. Sitting's not bad. But any activity done to an extreme is going to have side effects. So we always talk to our clients about you treat sitting like a sport. You prepare for it and you recover from it.
Wow.
And so because sitting is such a extended part of our lives now, like right now, what are we doing? And what did we do in the other room? We sat down to have lunch.
That's right.
And just the seated position has become a very efficient position for us to work, that knees and ankles just don't have to work as hard and don't require as much demand, and so they lose strength and capability. And that might be why some of those MMA fighters, they're busy all day and they might be prone to knee or ankle injuries because they're not on them. And so there's simple exercises you can do to help stimulate those joints and get them to wake back up.
That's good stuff. How are we doing on time? It's about time to wrap it up right now. Very good. Well, John is a busy guy, and I thank him so much for coming along today to share with us and engage in exploring how we can optimize health together, and joining everybody to optimize health. And we'd love to hear your feedback, share it around, share your podcast, say some words or whatever, and maybe we'll leave off with what are some of your favorite books that you'd love to read that you might recommend to others?
Well, you and I were just talking about the book that I read the most recently, that I had heard about. The author was on Joe Rogan's podcast. It's a man named James Nestor, and he wrote a book called Breathe. And that was a fascinating book. Well written, a way, like if I were involved with someone who went through their chemo experience like my mother-in-law just did, that's a place where if people are in the worst of situations and they can pattern their breathing, sometimes you can draw, if you want to use this metaphor, you can draw life back in and be a part of, oxygenating your body and getting it prepared so when you can get up, after recovery that you've got the resources to do it, that you kept your metabolism going. So that's a good book. I really, really thought that was very healthy. For anybody who's interested in Christianity, there's a book called Authentic Christianity written by Ray Steadman. And I think that gives a good start in understanding how the Christian life works. And
how does that how have you read that one? Is that kind of like Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis sort of?
Well, it's because it's been written so long ago, but it gives the idea of what the new covenant is, and that might be a abstract word, but it's still a very, very helpful book in understanding how to live life. So I do like that one. Those are the two books that come to mind right away. Of course, Pain Free, Pete Egoscue's book, which has sold over 2 million copies. That's a seminal book in terms of understanding the human body and can get people introduced to this idea of how the method could help them with any sort of performance issues they have. So those would be 3.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John, so much. This has been just a pure joy to be able to hang with you and talk, and we look forward to sharing again soon, and love you guys. Thanks for watching.